The compact is going to be of an unboxed design, but what does that mean and how come nobody's ever done it before? Well, the answer, spoiler alert, is it was impossible until now that it isn't. Let's discuss that. I'm Brian. Welcome to my Tesla Weekend. Joining me today is Herbert because he knows a lot about a lot of things. He is brighter and he makes us brighter, and we are grateful for it. Herbert, so great to have you on.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate this. This is fun.
Yeah. So when you saw the unboxed, was it an aha moment for you? Did a light bulb go off and you say, this makes sense?
No, not at all. Are you talking about like last year when they presented it, this idea? So no, complete out of the box. It's like, what are you talking about? Why would you break it down into 4 little pieces? I thought you would just make it faster. The process makes the most sense. That was weird. I can understand it.
To me, it was a light bulb moment, but I was wrong. I looked at it and said, of course, put all these pieces together, put all these pieces together, put the pieces together into bigger pieces. It just makes sense. So I went and talked to an engineer in Michigan and said, this is obvious. How come no one's done it? And he said, because it's impossible. We do it as much as we can already. Dashboards come in as whole assemblies. The door panels are put onto the doors as whole assemblies, but that's where it must end. If you stamp a car, you have to stamp the whole thing and weld it all into one piece. Think of how strong but lightweight a tennis racket is. If you tried to cut the webbing and put it back together, there would be nothing but points of failure. It would be infinite points of failure. So the first, I said, well, great, because they've got the castings. Doesn't that solve it? He goes, well, yes, that solves part of it. It's not enough. Great, you've got the castings, you've got a bunch of stuff mounted on, and you can mount them to the battery and slap a shell on it. But what's missing? You still have to climb into it and do a lot of work. Do you know what you have to add at that point?
It's all the wires, right? That's the issue why you can't do the unboxed model, because the wires go, you can't do a separate thing, and then the wires have to go all the way through everywhere to the car. Isn't that?
That's it. You had talked about a modular design. You said modular, it's great. Make the middle bigger, make the back different, make the front different, but the wiring has to still fit and it has to be right.
Yeah.
And how do you stretch it? And the answer on that is 48 volt. Because with 48 volt, when you wire a car, you want one continuous wire that runs the whole length of it. And you've seen pictures that show the difference between an old wiring harness and the new one on 48 volt. You've seen the difference between the old wiring system where everything has to go to central buses. But with this, it's 48 volt. It's basically a LAN cable. You can just connect it. And it's a good, permanent connection. So for wiring, 48 volt fixes that part of it. But 48 volt is only part of it.
Is it?
It is, because you still have to have the linkage for your steering, and you can't do modular if you've got linkage. It ends up being systems that run into 2 different parts of the car. I feel like we got an announcement this week that might address that.
Steer by wire. But then
Steer
somebody
by
told
wire.
me that that's steering, but you need the brake by wire, and they didn't announce that yet. And is that why the Cybertruck is what they said, partially unboxed? Like some parts of it is unboxed, but it's not fully.
You still have to run hydraulic fluid and tubes throughout the entire vehicle to all 4 wheels. And if you did a true unboxed, you'd put it all together and then have to go in and add it, or you'd have junctions that would be points of potential failure and likely failure over time, over enough time. But if you switch to brake by wire, you could do it. And because brake by wire's got too many problems, Herbert. It's never been fully implemented in a lot of vehicles. It's the motors to do it would be potentially too large because of the strength needed, and there's no fail-safe. So,
But they said that there's going to be redundancies. And
Redundancies.
there's already redundancies for the steer by wire, so they would have redundancies for the brake by wire.
they would have redundancies. So the 48 volt allows for both the steering and the braking systems to have smaller motors and actuators. And you could just step up the voltage and have different ones there, but now you're adding complexity. If it's already 48 volt, you've got very small motors to do the steering, very small motors or actuators to do the brakes, and you've got the double redundancy, but there's an additional redundancy that you can never get on a gasoline-powered dyno burner, and that is the best brakes are no brakes. If my Tesla can get me from 0 to 60 in 3-4 seconds, it can get me from 60 to 0 in 3 to 4 seconds. And if I start throwing up fault errors in my brake-by-wire system, it can just compensate by using only regen for braking and give me a message saying, get to the curb, you need immediate service, or get to a service center, I'm only giving you 10 more miles to drive. All of the pieces are finally coming. Regen. Use the regen all the way down. Well, the battery, what if the battery's too full? Right. Well, that's why it's triple redundant. At that point is ideally when the brakes fail, you're not at 100%, but even still, it could do a little damage to the battery if the alternative is you don't have brakes. So there's
very interesting. So Brian, I got a couple of questions, right? Because
Yes.
people are saying, so we're very, very close to the unboxed model. It's very likely, almost 100% chance that the Gen 2 compact car is going to be unboxed model. People were saying that the Cybertruck is partially unboxed. They're missing the brake-by-wire was one thing that they might be missing. But the question I have is like, people are still thinking that there might be a single casting. You had the front casting, the rear casting. There's this rumor that there's going to be single casting, but somebody told me you can't have a single casting if you're going to have the unboxed model.
It would be, one would kind of overpower the other. The whole point of the structural battery pack is a battery that you build for a car already has to have its own structure. You can't just put loose batteries into the compartment. You'd be back to having a double structure, and I don't know what benefit that would produce. And yeah, like you said, now it's not unboxed. Now everything's going onto one single piece. You're back to a linear line. One neat thing is each time we've seen a new car from Tesla, they've gotten one step closer to unboxed. The modules keep getting bigger. In Berlin, we saw them starting to mount seats directly onto the battery pack. That's one step in that direction. The bigger castings that keep coming out. And the original Model Y had a split rear casting. It was two castings that were bound together, and then they got it to one casting. And then what Corey, when he was still at Monroe and Associates, showed me in their display area is that casting has actually gotten bigger. It goes further back. It goes a little higher up. So the castings themselves can continue to grow. We could see more castings. We could see them go up onto the B pillars perhaps, but it's very complicated. Typically with a casting, it has to exist in two dimensions. You have to be able to open it up. If you were to have a casting for the entire car, you'd have inside parts to it, which would be complicated to a degree that would likely be counterproductive. Not saying it's impossible. It would just be difficult in ways that Tesla might not be ready to tackle, and possibly no one would tackle. The thing with these big castings, the thing with these big designs is that they have a lot of upfront costs that will have to be distributed across many vehicles for it to make sense. If you're only going to make 50,000 a year of something, you're not going to do it. That's why the S and X do not have mega castings.
100,000. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So how many are you going to make? A lot. When Elon said we dug our own grave with the Cybertruck, he didn't mean that each Cybertruck is difficult to make. He meant that the machine that builds the machine is difficult to make. And once that's dialed in, and it appears we may be just about there, everything kind of falls into place. Am I crazy, Herbert?
Not crazy at all. And here's something that's even crazier. Okay? I'm sure a lot of people will not agree with this idea, but that the unboxed model sets us up to be a modular platform. What do you think of modular? Think Legos. So let's say you're building a car out of Legos. You're going to create this part, you're going to create this part, you're going to connect it together. I've got a compact car. Now you go, oh, I want it to be a sedan. So then you take the two apart and you put something in the middle and you connect it together. Now you have a 4-person car. I want it to be 6 people. I want a third row. You just add another modular part to it. And then, oh, I want it to be a van. So then you just create the outside of it and slap it on. And so that's what I think is going to happen. They are building a platform that is revolutionary, that's never been done before. And it's going to be Legos, right? Modular. And I can just make a limousine if I wanted to. I just add 2, 3 of these middle parts and then put it all together. And every part is just built by themselves. So now what you just said, that front part, that back part, it's basically the same part for all my cars. My truck, my van, my 2-person compact car, my 4-person compact car, the van that we're going to use for the boring company, it's all going to be the same parts. And so you can have millions and millions and millions of that part and just connect it all together. What do you think of that idea?
You had shared this theory with me over and over for probably 2 or 3 months, and I kept saying it won't work. There's a missing piece. And now we can see it ain't missing. It's on the shelf waiting to be deployed. Because I was telling you, what are we going to do? Have 50 different wiring harnesses? Nope.
Right.
They all just clip into each other. Are we going to have 50 different sets of hydraulics? Are they going to? Nope. It's the same brakes for everything. They're already there. All you got to do is plug them in. I'm telling you right now, Wall Street doesn't get this.
They don't
you
get
and
it.
I
They don't
get
know it
this
yet.
in
It's
ways
coming.
they don't get it. So this is beyond exciting. In the comments, I would say, if modular is the future, if you can have anything, what car do you want? Do you want a cyber car? Do you want a limousine with 700 miles of range because we put in a bunch of battery packs? What do you want? What is your dream? What can you build out of something that is as simple as playing Mad Libs with car design. Herbert, thank you so much for hanging out with me. It is a pleasure as always. And for everybody else, leave a comment. What did we miss? What do we misunderstand? Thank you, everybody, for your support. It's how I'm able to go out to these places and meet these people and learn these things and bring you these insights. And it means the world to me. So for everybody else, stay tuned, stay juicy, and I cannot wait to hear from you clever robots in the cyber factory. I don't know.